All right, so we are going to pick up where we left off on the last episode with Caleb 2.0 and Ari. Right. I'm currently experiencing minor annoyance. Can you please let go of my face? When he didn't immediately do so, I reached up to remove his hand, but he grabbed my wrist instead, placing 2 fingers right below my thumb. Still experiencing tachycardia? As expected, you shouldn't be up. Considering you haven't been released yet, even an idiot would know they shouldn't be up. He shot Ari another annoyed look. Or allow a patient to walk outside of the infirmary. And this is the second time you've left your room without permission. Well, Ari had said he'd complain. We were about to return. Morgan went through quite a lot to arrive here. She wanted the reassurance of seeing the complex herself. I didn't think a quick walk would be too much. Did you consult your medical degree before making that assessment, Ariel? I believe you're well aware I don't have one. In that case, perhaps you should stick to teleportation and leave the thinking to those of us better at it. In the meantime, I'll be taking my patient back. Ah, what a jerk. Ouch. Dr. Sasaki fingers looped around my wrist and he started pulling me away. I bit back a sigh. Maybe I should just start getting used to being passed around like an object. Oh, Morgan. I'll accompany you. Dr. Sasaki prodded me towards the door, sparing only a quick, disdainful glance back at Ari. Unnecessary. Indeed, why don't you report that she's awake to that forgetful imbecile in charge? That, he must be referring to, what's his name? I think Magnus. The what now? Reporting to Magnus about her condition does not preclude the possibility of me seeing her back to her room. Did this doctor just call the leader of Endgame a forgetful imbecile? Your participation isn't required. I glanced at Ari over my shoulder as I was ushered out of the room by the doctor. It didn't seem as though he would follow us, which surprised me a little. Another soft sigh escaped as I walked. I didn't suppose he'd have any reason to. He was only doing his job and allowing me to go for a walk just as an indulgence I should probably be grateful for. It wasn't like he had to keep me company. A sigh, most definitely a sign of distress. The residual effects of sigh fatigue could be causing an emotional instability. I heard the doctor muttering to himself as he walked beside me. Was he going to be analyzing every single thing I did? He flipped through the display, observing me out of the corner of his eye. When he noticed me looking back, that didn't stop him at all. In fact, his lips curved up into an odd little smile. You appear to be recovering well, though. Thanks. They say you initiated a cyverse powerful enough to bring down an entire building. Do they? Unfortunately, I don't remember it all that well. What a pity. We have records from Ariel and Caleb, who witnessed it firsthand. Those haven't been turned over to me yet. Cybursts are difficult to achieve. Generally, only bishops and queen ranks can create cybursts of note. Is that so? Dr. Sasaki tapped the display against his chin, smiling at me over the top of it. Perhaps when you've recovered, you would demonstrate one? I have many theories about your abilities I'd like to verify. I'm not thinking that far ahead yet. Of course not. Of course, and we mustn't forget that psi fatigue recovery can take some time. For you to achieve that magnitude of cyburst without training causes tremendous mental stress. There was even mild brain damage. What? Brain damage? That's what I need on top of everything else. We repaired it. But you didn't think you could put that much strain on your nervous system with no consequences, did you? Or perhaps you did. Your records show you may not have been aware of where you were in Esper. I didn't know I was a queen rank, and I didn't look. I didn't think much of anything when I created that cyburst. I was just panicked. How fascinating. A queen so adept at mimicking normal psi waves, even she was unaware of her rank this far into adulthood. Okay, so yeah, she was mimicking normal psi waves. A brainwave emitted by a fork system, a measurement of the magnitude of the wave determines someone's strength, while frequency determines rank. Psi waves are not made up of a single wave, but but involve a highly complex multi-wave structure. Some form of psi waves can be mimicked by machines, allowing for technology that can replicate psi. But the more complex waveforms emitted by high-ranking espers have never been replicated. Each esper has a unique waveform that acts as a sort of psi fingerprint. Since psi energy can linger in an area for a period of time after psi has been utilized there, this can sometimes be used to identify espers in esper-related crimes. Queen ranks are able to perfectly mimic the waveform of another esper by manipulating their own psi wave to match. Huh. So doesn't that mean that like a queen rank, or I mean queen ranks are the strongest, but doesn't that mean that they could pretty much like frame someone by mimicking their waves if that's how they identify some espers for esper related crimes? You truly are a unique case, aren't you? Doctor, were you not returning her to her room to rest? Ari's sudden appearance may have startled me, but Dr. Sasaki didn't act the least surprised. And weren't you going to give a report to the forgetful imbecile? I never indicated I would leave Morgan in your care before I did so. Hmm. I'm fairly certain this is my room anyway. I can just go rest. Alone. Interviews and demonstrations will have to wait. I expected a protest, but as I sidestepped the doctor, he said nothing. Ari also watched me go without a word. Leaning against the door, I shut my eyes, listening to Dr. Sasaki launching into a rant about Ari knowing better than to give in to some whim and let me out of my room. A faint smile made its way to my face as I listened to him get into trouble, but it faded quickly. I kicked off my shoes and fell into the bed. Rolling onto my side, I clutched a pillow to my chest. There were still a lot of questions about how they'd found me and about what would happen to me now. But, for the first time, I also realized what all this meant for other people in my life. I never imagined the fallout from all this would land on my parents or brothers. Were they mad at me? Did they hate me? I squeezed my eyes shut, knowing that wasn't the case. Even if they were angry I'd been lying to them all this time, none of them would hate me for it. I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to go home. Tears threatened again. I sat up, pushing the pillow away. If I let myself get stuck in that way of thinking, I'd just cry again. Going home was already outside of the realm of possibilities. I leaned back against the pillow, staring at the wall opposite the bed. And there was nothing I could do about my family anymore either. Endgame was keeping them safe. That was the important part. And for me, Cora Solaris was the safest place now, whether or not I was happy about it. I would have to make the best of it somehow. Crying wouldn't change anything. This had always been a possibility. I hadn't expected it to happen in this way. I hadn't expected it to affect my family, but I'd always known there was a chance they would discover me. I shut my eyes, letting the tiredness take over. For now, I would rest, and then demand a bath because I'd never had the one I wanted. And also, I was kind of hungry. And someone definitely owed me a bag of tangerines. That was the last thought I had before I fell asleep again. Chapter 2, Ari's Route, A Piece of Home. I pulled on my boots and stood, stretching the kinks out of my back. 3 days later, and I was so ready to be out of the infirmary. Though, following behind that readiness was an equally powerful reluctance to leave. I spent the last few days oscillating between boredom and amused irritation at the constant poking, prodding, and questioning. The only thing that made it bearable was getting to know the staff, the nurses, orderlies, and even Dr. Sasaki. I think I've been pronouncing that wrong the entire time. I think it's Sasaki, oh my gosh. He was admittedly odd, but he was also sort of a funny person. He had a very deep fascination with espers. In a way, it reminded me of Trent a little. Trent is coming back up, I see. Even of how I could be with certain topics. It had been off-putting at first, but I'd grown accustomed to it quickly. And outside the medical ward was an entire facility of people I didn't know. The few I didn't know I hadn't seen much. Dr. Sasaki had banned visitors, lest someone abscond with me again. Apparently, he held grudges. I shot him another sidelong glance as he stood next to the bed, looking at a digital display in his hand. Everyone kept cheerily informing me that I still had some residual effects of psi fatigue and shouldn't overdo it yet. In spite of the dire warnings, I felt fine now. Blood pressure stable, heart rate is good, synaptic activity continues to stabilize. Your euphoric system appears to be reaching homeostasis after the extreme stimulation of the last few weeks. I have to take a moment and appreciate the science terms. That's a I love that they're incorporating that into this. The fork system is the system that controls psionic ability. It is located in the brain and, like many body systems, is still being studied and researched. Some aspects of how psi work are well understood, while others are still quite mysterious. Like many other structures in the brain, the fork system of N-class espers and all non-espers with limited psi ability have nuclei clusters called Corymbus occultatum that can be found throughout every part of the brain. They generate psi waves and are what considered and are what control psi. Huh. The only people on Arcalis who do not possess a fork system are those who are afflicted with nanite rejection. Some of those people possess partially developed fork systems, or people who have never been exposed to nanites in high concentrations, such as the Nomos, since there is a much lower nanite saturation in the wastes. Without a fork system, you cannot generate psi. Different N-class espers have slightly different configurations of the Corymbus occultatum, and in N-class espers, the nanites in the brain are integral to the process of these nuclei clusters regulating psi energy. Though an N-class esper can still use psi to some degree, if their nanosystem is completely deactivated, it has a debilitating effect on their fork system most of the time. F-class espers have distinct differences in their fork system which make them more difficult to detect. Their nuclei clusters are located in different places and have different configurations that aren't consistent from esper to esper. They also possess a unique type of cluster called Corymbus latens that N-class espers do not possess. Their nanites do not play a role in their generation and regulation of psi, so even people who have never been exposed to nanites can develop these type of nuclei clusters and develop F-class psi. Okay. He looked at me as he spoke. I expect all functions to return to normal within the next 10 days. We'll continue to observe you for the next month to be safe, so you'll be required to come for weekly check-ins. Now that your bio-expansion is complete, we may see full recovery sooner than expected. That's good news. I believe your mental state will continue to improve as well, though I remain convinced relocating you to a more comfortable environment will speed things up. Dr. Sasaki suddenly leaned in very close. That said, I admit I still feel somewhat offended you find my infirmary disagreeable. I put up my hand to fend him off, already used to him doing this sort of thing. The fact that you insist on invading my personal space without warning is one of the reasons I'm uncomfortable here. Pupils are slightly dilated, a small spike in heart rate. Do I make you uncomfortable, Morgan? Well, I hedged. Somehow I didn't think insulting the man in charge of my medical care was a good idea. Good thinking. And he didn't always make me uncomfortable, just when he forgot that personal space was a thing. Difficulty maintaining eye contact is sometimes a sign of deception. Look at the little smirk on his face. I snapped my gaze back to him, noting he had that insufferable little smile again. He is giving me such hard mark vibes, from Changeling, like with that little smirk. That would mean I do make you uncomfortable. Will you please stop doing that? Doing what? Analyzing everything I do. It's incredibly disconcerting. Not everything is a medical condition. On the contrary. He started making notes on the display again, though I had no idea what could possibly be interesting enough for him to write down. We exist as physical beings. There is not a single thing we taste, see, touch, hear, smell, or do that isn't driven by our physiology. Whether it's an illness or an emotion, everything is, indeed, a medical condition. If you say so. And as your physician, it's my job to analyze your medical condition. Even as he said that, he did back out of my personal space, though. I'm certain you're aware of this, but though you are being released from the infirmary for now, we'll need to run some tests on your abilities in the future. It's necessary to test your capabilities in a controlled environment and record your psi fingerprint. Psi fingerprint? Every Esper has a unique waveform. As a queen, you can mimic others, but your psi still possesses its own waveform. We keep record of every Esper in Endgame. That now includes you. But for the time being, Morgan, focus on your recovery. I'm looking forward to an interesting display once you're fully mended. He smiled again and strode out of the room. I groaned softly, dragging a hand through my hair. Sometimes I got this feeling of being little more than a new toy for them to study and show off, though I knew that wasn't a fair assessment, not for any of them, and not for Dr. Sasaki either. I didn't think he was a bad person. Actually, he'd never been anything but kind to me. He did seem to care about his patients a great deal. There came a soft tap at the door. Come in. I wasn't terribly surprised to see Ari was the one who had come to pick me up, but he wasn't alone this time. The woman with him was one I'd met that night in the alley. I hadn't seen her at all since my arrival. I wasn't sure I even remembered her name. She peeked around the doorframe and grinned at me as Ari stepped inside. You are looking a lot better than I remember. I'm feeling much better than I was then, too. I hope you don't mind Vanessa coming with me, she insisted. Of course I don't mind. I couldn't hide away and avoid meeting people forever. I told you it would be fine. And don't let this kid mislead you. She slapped Ari's arm with the back of her hand as she passed him on her way to me. I'm not Vanessa. I'm Vaughn. He knows I prefer it, he just likes to be a brat. Ah, it's nice to meet you. Kid? Brat? I didn't look to be that much younger than her, if at all. So, do you remember me? I did, but interestingly enough, I didn't remember the artificial arm. Maybe I'd been too distracted to notice it before. Part of her right hand was artificial as well. Ah, I didn't notice that either. I noticed the two fingers that were artificial, but I didn't notice the arm. I wonder how that happened. I remember you somewhat. There are still bits and pieces of that day that are pretty fuzzy. Now that I think about it, didn't Ari say you were a bishop? Correct, one of the best. If you're ready to go, Morgan, there's no reason we can't discuss this on the way to your new apartment. After all, we did come here to escort you there. I love how they're using the word escort when it sounds more like, they're trying to make sure she doesn't make a run for it again. Don't make it sound so dire. We're not escorting her like she's a criminal. See, Vaughn and I are on the same wavelength here. She grinned at me as we walked to the door together. A little overwhelmed, I simply walked alongside her without saying anything. We're just going to show you where you'll be staying. It's not like we're some kind of armed escort. I guess it's good to know. You guess? Girl, if you have to start having to have an armed escort to just walk you down the hall, it's time to be worried. As we walked, there were a few residual butterflies trying to start up, but Vanessa gave my arm a very gentle squeeze. When I looked at her, she smiled softly. No need to be so nervous, you know. I'm not nervous. She just laughed at that. Yeah, sure. We're not psychics or anything, so that wobbly attempt at reassurance is definitely convincing. Well, she had a point there. I couldn't exactly fool an organization of espers, could I? Sorry. Have you always been this timid? This is definitely not the impression I got from Arya and Caleb's report. I'm not trying to be timid. As we passed the lounge Arya and I had gone to a few days ago, I realized that spot marking the end of what I had seen of this place. Everything beyond that point was new. I can understand how you feel a little. Whether you liked being stuck in that room or not, the infirmary probably felt safe. I imagine stepping out here feels like enemy territory. Except we're not your enemy. Inside the lift, Vanessa pressed on one of the buttons on the control panel. I'm sure it's difficult, suddenly having to come to terms with things on a level that's a little more real. Probably like crossing the point of no return. I swallowed hard. That definitely was a bit on the nose. Vanessa, isn't that going too far? Wait, was it? Sorry, I didn't mean anything by that. Was I right? I just. It's alright. I mean, you're a bishop after all. In spite of what she says, Vanessa isn't looking into your thoughts. Scanning the mind of a conscious individual and pulling out useful information is quite challenging. Is it? You'd be surprised. People's minds are just a cacophony of jumbled thoughts that fly past at unimaginable speeds and vanish in an instant. Picking out a single thread of them and making sense of it isn't something you can do usually, or something you can usually do if someone is awake and, not drugged. Plus, it's pretty dangerous territory for both parties. But there are espers with telepathy. Sorry, guys. It's not what you're imagining, probably. It's more detecting intent, feelings, images, or ideas. It's not like having normal conversations or eavesdropping on what someone is thinking. I really like how they explain this. That's really interesting. Because I mean, I think that's typically what most people assume. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time saying telepathy. I think correct me if I'm saying it wrong in the comments, please. Um, because I have a feeling that I am. But I really do like that the description they provide here because I think like I said that's what most people assume it's like, but I think it's much more believable for it to be sort of these fragmented, thoughts or ideas or threads of something. And don't worry, Ari's right. I'm not peeking into your head or anything. Despite how she looks, Vanessa is simply rather talented at reading people. Hey, what the hell does that mean? Despite how she looks? She grabbed Ari's cheeks and gave it a very solid pinch. He reached up an arm to fend her off. Vanessa, please stop. And what's with all the Vanessa crap again lately? I told you to knock it off. Is this how you treat your superiors? You do not outrank me. I'm not talking about rank, buddy. Bishops are just legitimately superior to you scrawny knights. I broke into laughter watching her corner him against the wall of the elevator cab and bully him. His expression barely changed at all, but it was still rare for me to see him that animated. So Vanessa totally gives me like big sister vibes and her dynamic with Ari, like constantly teasing him. Give me one sec, I just need to take a drink. And somehow just seeing something that looked like a semi-normal interaction was nice. Yeah, so Ari is very monotone, right? He's not really expressive. I don't necessarily think that means that he doesn't feel a whole lot. Well, who knows? Because that would explain why he has so much trouble understanding certain concepts. Vanessa and Ari both froze as I laughed at them, and somehow their surprised expressions just made me laugh harder. Sorry, I'm sorry. Vanessa abandoned Ari and beamed at me. You finally laughed. Ari straightened his clothes and brushed his hair back into place as the door to the lift opened. If you want to make her laugh, it wasn't necessary to go that far, Vanessa. Vanessa tried to elbow him, but he slipped out into the hall before she could. She shot me a grin. Like I said, he's definitely a brat. Come on. She pulled me into the corridor and past multiple rooms. Vanessa, you don't have to drag her with you like that. She's still recovering. Von, I don't know if it should be Von or Van. I guess it'd be Van, right? Because it's. Oh, no, it'd be Von because it's Vanessa. Vaughn gave Arya a teasing grin over her shoulder. You're already being awfully protective of her, aren't you? As the Queen's Knight, it is my job. Hey, I'm the Queen's Bishop. Your job isn't to protect her from me. Queen's Knight? What does that mean? He's talking about being a part of the First Guard. Since you're still new to all this, you're likely unaware. The highest ranked espers in Endgame are placed in an elite group referred to as the Guard. The Guard is generally headed by a Queen and King ranked esper, each of whom has a Knight, Rook, and Bishop assigned to them. Though the King is currently considered the de facto commander of Endgame's esper force, the Queen and her Guard lead and oversee many of the most important missions. Wow, look at Mr. Encyclopedia here. I think you missed your true calling, Sir Ariel. Ari ignored her as she started teasing again. But the Queen's position was empty, wasn't it? Didn't Dr. Sasaki say something about that? Correct. Until you arrived, the entire guard was headed by Magnus Ulrich, currently the only king rank in Endgame. The Queen's Guard still tends to oversee the bigger missions, but the Queen position has been vacant for a long time. That explains why they're so eager to have her here. So they were pulling me off the street and pushing me straight into one of the most prominent roles in Endgame just because of my rank. Based on what they said, this elite team was usually made up of just 8 people, maybe even less. What did a rank say about my actual ability to do this job? Come on, Morgan. There's no need to think so deeply about any of that yet. You still haven't even fully recovered. Vaughn pulled me a little faster down the corridor, gesturing at the doors. As you can see, this is one of our residential wings. Agents live here with their families, or alone if they don't have any family staying here with them. Entire families stay here? Sometimes. Parents and siblings of minors can live on the grounds if they have skills that enable them to work somewhere on the complex. Spouses and the like are allowed, even if they work elsewhere. What about families that can't work here? A lot of them live in Brazil, but as you probably know, it's not easy to become a resident there. Right. Brazil was pretty notorious for having a very strict immigration policy. Getting a permit to live in the city was quite tough. Regardless, I hadn't really thought about families living here, though I guess it made sense. Anyway, since you're here alone, we shuffled things around so you're pretty close to me and Ari. Oh, just the two of you? Is there someone else you prefer to live close to? Since you said it that way, I'm assuming I was put close to the two of you because of the whole guard thing. And Ari said there's a knight, bishop, and a rook. Indeed. Indeed, Caleb is also nearby. Caleb? Did she forget who Caleb was already? Vanessa burst out laughing. Look at her face. Oh man, you really don't like that guy, do you? Oh, okay. I am vibing so hard with Morgan right now. Like, we're on the same page. I have a feeling Caleb is going to be just like Mark, where you can't stand him, but like, they're also amazing together. Anyway, in spite of the situation, in spite of feeling sort of down and a little scared, as I watched her wipe at her eyes and laugh, I found myself smiling in amusement. Wow, I wish Caleb could see the look of absolute rapture you had when Ari said he's in your guard too. Vanessa. She leaned against the wall, holding her torso as she tried to catch her breath. Not a fan of our little Caleb? She calls him Kale. Well, he kidnapped me, and was kind of rude about it. She snickered and shot Arya a teasing grin. And Arya wasn't. He was surprisingly polite for a kidnapper. Arya managed to look mildly exasperated at her teasing. We did give our word we'd take her straight to her headquarters. Well, we certainly can't pause in the hallway to have a bit of a laugh. That would have us going against our word, wouldn't it? Anyway, don't worry about Kale, alright? He's a bigger brat than this one, but he's actually not a bad guy. You needn't act as if you're that much older than us, Vanessa. It's not about age, it's about experience. Experience! How old are the two of you, anyway? Now that Ari brought it up, I was curious. 42, thank you very much. Okay, so it looks like this is going to go into time measurements. I remember there being something about this in the very beginning episodes. During the aerospace travel that led colonists to Arcalis, the caravan ships used a sort of modified Earth calendar and clock to mark the passage of time. When the first caravan arrived at Arcalis, a planet without day/night cycles or even proper seasons, there was some debate on whether or not to continue this tradition or move to an exclusive calendar more suited to each world, or to such a world. Solar years on Arcalis are shorter than years on Earth, with roughly one Earth year passing for every 1.5 on Arcalis. Arcalis has a 15-month calendar and keeps a 20-hour day-night cycle that is largely artificial, as the planet itself does not have a natural cycle. The biodomes on the day side of the planet darken during the night, while the night side biodomes have artificial lighting to simulate day. Usually day and night are used to refer to this day-night cycle. Sometimes the term cycle is used to refer to the full 20 hours days. Because of the difference in how years are marked, character ages seem higher than they would be in Earth years. 36. Huh, I expected him to be older. He looked young, but he just acted so stuffy. Yet wasn't even that much older than me. So I think let's go ahead and check the Oh, look at our I guess this would be the affection meter, right? Look at our affection meter with Ari. That's awesome. Do we have any? Okay, yeah, let's go to the profiles. I think we have more information here. So Ari is technically 24 by our measure of age. Stoic, calm, and chivalrous, Arya is known for being impassive and difficult to read. He keeps his feelings to himself and rarely expresses strong emotions. More of a listener than attacker, it is sometimes difficult to know what is going on behind his usually serious expression. He has been a part of Endgame since his very early childhood, having been taken in by them at a far earlier age than most of the organization's other members. I have a theory that that's part of the reason why he's not really like expressive as far as his emotions, because he's grown up in this sort of in this organization where you're not really taught, and it's not considered maybe acceptable to be as expressive as people normally would be. You're 34, right? Pretty recently turned. 7 months ago. I don't know if that counts as recently anymore. That makes you a baby on our little team. Kale is 37. Anyway, here we are. We stopped in front of the door with the number DO1, or D1 on it. Vaughn pushed a code into the console next to it. You can change the password yourself, but for now we just put your birthday in. She pushed the door open and shot me a grin. Surprise! Oh my god, it looks exactly like her apartment back at home. What? The layout was the exact same as my old flat. All my things were in the same place and everything. It was weird. Vaughn squeezed past me and stepped inside, spinning around to face me. What do you think? I'm not sure. How exactly did you do this? Ari followed me inside, stopping just beside the door as I went further in to poke around and explore. It seems they sent a team to retrieve all your belongings. Yep, right after these two kidnappers grabbed you. I would prefer it if both of you stopped calling me that. Apprehending an unregistered esper is part of our job. Thanks, Ari. Vaughn just laughed and flopped onto the sofa, making herself at home. I still wasn't sure how I felt about it. Not Vaughn on the sofa, but everything else. There was a strange disconnect between where I knew I was and where it felt like I was. Yeah, I totally agree with Morgan here. I would actually prefer a different apartment if I was her. Just because, you're making this major transition in your life. And for me, like going back to the same place that I was at before would make me sort of want things to be the way that they were versus being able to move on and move forward. I trailed my fingers over one of my shelves. It's not just that my things are here, the floor plan and layout are the same as well. We wanted you to be comfortable. This entire wing is set up in a modular fashion, so we can literally move the walls around. It makes it pretty easy to rearrange things like this. That does seem convenient. Sometimes it's easier to rearrange walls than shuffle people around when they get married or move in together. When we met, or when me and Mara got married, we already lived next door. So all we had to do was relocate a couple walls and rearrange the furniture. Even the fixtures are the same though. Some of the wall details. I couldn't imagine that they ripped some of this stuff out of my flat to bring it here. We've got good attention to detail. They both watched me as I poked through the kitchen. Don't like it? Honestly, it does kind of make me uncomfortable, but I don't want to seem ungrateful because they went through all this effort to make things, completely identical to the way that they were before, and probably to make her feel more at home and make the transition less jarring for her. So I think I'm gonna go with I don't dislike it just because I don't want to be rude, and they did put a lot of effort into it, but yeah. I don't dislike it exactly, it's just a little disconcerting, is all. It's like being back home, but I'm not back home. I'm not quite sure how to feel about it. But I guess I can see the intent behind it. If I'm among my own things, I may be able to adapt faster without getting homesick. Or I guess that's the theory anyway. Even so, you don't seem entirely pleased either. Well, in a way, it just makes it all the more apparent I won't be going home. So you're trying to say it backfired on us. Oh no! See, this is what I was worried about. No, I'm not saying that. I just wasn't expecting it, that's all. I leaned on the counter and gave them both a tired smile. Maybe I'm a little burned out on surprises, that's all. I appreciate the sentiment behind it, though. That said, your place is tiny. We can definitely move some walls and give you more space. The flat on the other side of this one is empty. That's not necessary. You don't even have a proper bed. What? We don't have a proper bed? This thing can't be all that comfortable, so we must sleep on the futon then. So this really is, I assumed there were some other rooms to the apartment that we just didn't see as its angle, but this is really all there is. Holy moly. I just laughed a little as she bounced on the sofa. You might be surprised. I might be. Or I might just go home and sprawl gratefully on my massive real bed and hope you're nice and jealous over there. They did expand the flat to include a new bedroom. What? When did that happen? It was in the report, Vanessa. There was a full report on my flat? Ugh, you're going to learn one thing fast. If you're, wait, yeah, you're going to learn one thing fast. In this place, there's a report on everything. Well, anyway, this is your new home. I hope you learn to love it eventually. Technically, it's my old home too, and I already did love it, so... Oh, so you can be a little cheeky when you want, can't you? I'd offer the two of you something to drink, but there's only water. I love how she doesn't even like address that. You can place an order for food items if you want, but many of us simply use the mess hall or lounge. But some of us do like to cook at home. Some of us are unaccustomed to cooking for ourselves. Okay. Then some of us need to learn. Oh my goodness, these two. There's little time for it between training and missions. Yeah, so I have a little bit of a better feeling, like, for Ari's character now that we're getting into his route a little. He reminds me of, like, the traditional, sort of like soldier. Or, knight. He's very dutiful, very, like, duty-bound, very responsible, very black and white in the way that he sees things. But he has really good intentions, he wants to do the right thing. My theory, because I am gonna end the episode after this, but if I had to guess, I would say that, because I do like to sort of just postulate and stuff. I hope that's the right word. Sometimes I use the wrong words. I do like to hypothesize, and I feel like one of the major plot points in his route is going to be sort of him being torn in some way, depending upon how the plot progresses, between his relationship with Morgan and his loyalty to Endgame, because he's very, very loyal to Endgame. Like, he's very, like, by the book, always likes to follow the rules. Although that's not necessarily true, because he did take her out of the infirmary. So I mean, it clearly doesn't always hold true, but I don't know. That's just my guess. There's something major that's going to happen, and he's going to have to choose between the two. Anyway, I am going to go ahead and end things here. I hope that you guys are enjoying it. I don't know what to expect, because she's getting settled in here. I do want to check and see how many chapters are in each route. Because if I remember correctly I don't know if it's going to be like Changeling. I know some of the things in this are different than Changeling, but I think for Changeling there was like a common route that was 5 episodes, and then I think the individual routes were about 10 chapters. So that's what I'm expecting here, but we'll see. Anyway, I hope that you guys did enjoy the episode. I'm going to go ahead and leave it here, and I will see you next time.